Hi. Can we talk about something really quickly?
Sure.
What do you think of my shirt?
Bobcat Nation.
Okay, we need to talk about something else.
What is that?
It's my mini BU mug from Nancy.
Oh, there we go. Nancy Stanley. I didn't even know what that was because I don't have one.
Yeah, I know Dr. Forbes and Dr. Krentz don't have one, and I've got my shaker bottle too. Okay, so we talked about swag. Scott, we're going to dive right in here because I know you are super busy with kids. Please tell me a little bit about your education, what you currently do, and kind of what your life looks like.
Okay. Um, so currently I'm an associate professor at Brandon University in Canada in the Department of Physical Education. I completed my PhD in the area of sport nutrition at the University of Alberta, and I did a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Calgary looking at exercise and nutrition for brain health. I also completed my International Olympic Committee Sport Nutrition Diploma, and also through the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology, I'm a clinical exercise physiologist with a performance specialization. So that's a little bit about my academic background. I've published around 50 peer-reviewed scientific manuscripts, a couple book chapters, and several academic presentations.
Okay, people, what you need to know is Scott Forbes is a brain, a huge genius. And how old are you, Forbes?
Uh, I'm getting older there, Nat, so getting close to 50 now.
Shut up. Are you 35 or 36?
I'm 37.
Oh, you're 37 with 50 publications. Oh my gosh. I don't know what you do in your spare time because it sounds like you're a lazy guy. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of tell everyone the background. Last year, Scott reached out to me prior to the International Society of Sports Nutrition Conference, and we became Twitter friends, and then we became Instagram friends, and then we became friends in real life. And the reason that I have all this Brandon University swag is that Dr. Forbes and his colleague, Dr. Krentz, invited me to Brandon University last fall, where I had a wonderful trip. I did speaking. I actually went to some of Scott's classes. Your students are so lucky. You are the best instructor. So anyway, on with the show. I would say that you have a somewhat vested interest in firefighter health and wellness. Can you kind of clue us in why?
Yeah, mainly through my wife's family. So her brother is currently a firefighter in Winnipeg, um, Manitoba, Canada, and her dad was a longtime firefighter in Saskatoon, and her grandpa was also a firefighter in Saskatoon as well. So she has a long kind of family history of firefighters within her family. So obviously I'm married into that, and so I have a vested interest in firefighters for sure.
And just FYI, Scott's wife, Jen, is absolutely amazing. She's a physio in Canada, and so she's super cool. And also, FYI, Scott participated in hashtag Devote December with us, and I believe he had the most impressive performance, wherein he did push-ups in the snow, shirtless. Okay, so exactly. So, Scott, firefighters have this personality, and I know that this initiative is not just for firefighters, but we're going to talk a little bit about firefighters. They have this extreme personality where they want to either do all of the things or none of the things. And sometimes they want to mow the lawn while their house is burning down. And I love this analogy that you have about sledgehammers. So, can you elaborate on the sledgehammers?
Yeah, so I always tell my students, and I want people to focus on kind of key things that are going to make a big impact on health and that have been scientifically proven. So this is, there's a professor at the University of Alberta, Tim Caulfield. He had a Netflix documentary series, but he's kind of promotes these things that are really scientifically proven, and I've adapted them to basically call them my sledgehammers, the things that make a big impact. So things like eating real food, exercising regularly, sleep. Those are things that I think people don't do very well, and they have a huge impact both on your physical health, but also on your mental health as well. So there's all these other things that people try to do, supplements, or which I think we'll talk about later. All these other kind of gadgety things that people try. But really, if you focus on those sledgehammers, eating real food, exercising regularly, and sleeping, you're going to be a much healthier person.
Awesome. And there's actually 5, right? One of them is don't smoke, and the other one is maintain a healthy weight.
Yeah. So, and then there's a few others that are kind of on the fringe. One is developing relationships, which is obviously a challenge during this particular time. But connecting out, things like that. And then prevention is another one. So things like even just wearing your seatbelt, vaccinations, for example. So they all get kind of clustered together into a category called prevention. So there's about 7 sledgehammers, but I think 3 of them are kind of the most important: sleep, exercise, and eating real food.
So those are the sledgiest of the sledgehammers. We're going to patent that. Okay, so you are I would say, a nutrition expert. So let's talk about the difference between macronutrients and micronutrients. So let's hone in on those important macronutrients first.
Okay, so the macronutrients are just things that provide energy. So those are things like proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Those are your macronutrients. So micronutrients are things like vitamins and minerals. So they're important for health, but they don't necessarily provide you with energy.
Perfect.
So that's kind of the biggest difference between macronutrients and micronutrients.
Great. And we have seen time and time again the slide go up at nutrition presentations of the lean, like a tenderloin steak, and then the fatty marbled steak. And they talk about this process of age-related issues with maintaining your muscle. So talk about the macronutrients, that's really important, and then that whole process.
Yeah, so typically as you age, your physical activity levels go down, and associated with that is a loss in muscle mass. And muscle mass is super important for health. So not only does that impact your brain, but it also impacts several other areas like inflammation, cardiovascular health. So it's been linked to all those things. So maintaining muscle mass is super important. And protein is probably the most important macronutrient to support muscle health, especially as you age. So Dr. Darren Kando has done quite a few studies looking at protein supplementation in combination with resistance training in older adults. And if you consume a higher protein diet plus train, you can preserve muscle mass as you age.
Well, good news. There's hope for even us old people if we eat adequate protein. But what is adequate protein, Scott? Can you give us sort of a range that we would consider adequate, especially as we age?
Yeah, so the recommended dietary allowance by the Institute of Medicine says that people should consume 0.8 grams per kilogram per day. But we know that people that exercise need more protein than that. And perhaps even as we age, we actually may need more protein than that. So the International Society for Sport Nutrition got together a bunch of experts in the field of protein and exercise and came up with a consensus. And so they published this like kind of summary of what is the best scientific evidence suggest. And they suggest 1.6 grams per kilogram per day of protein, up to 2.0 or 2.0 grams per kilogram per day of protein. So double what the recommended dietary allowance is. And that's what they suggest to support muscle health and all those good things that happen, especially when you exercise.
And I love that you said that the ISSN position stand made a recommendation, because position stands are a great place to get your information. It's really hard as a layperson to wade through all that research. Um, Scott, I know that probably some of our listeners have heard that too much protein is dangerous for them. Can you just hit really quickly on Dr. Antonio's research?
Yeah, so he's one of the kind of best researchers in the area of sport nutrition and exercise, and he's actually done the long-term studies. So he's given people a large amount of protein for up to a year, for example, and they've measured liver and kidney function, and there's no effect, even with ridiculously high protein. So I think some of the studies have been around 4 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, or higher even.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Which is just, yeah, a lot of protein. Like, it's like, it would be very difficult to consume that much protein. And their kidneys are perfectly fine. And actually, in some situations, consuming a higher protein actually helps individuals lose fat mass. So it's kind of the opposite that people would think. You think, oh, if you're eating more, you're going to gain fat. But they actually show that if you ate more protein, even if you're eating more calories, they actually lost more fat mass. But important for those studies was that they were doing a very large amount of exercise as well. So you can't just eat more protein and be like, oh, I'm going to lose fat mass because, Dr. Antonio says you can eat more protein and lose fat. Well, you have to also do a lot of exercise as well.
And actually, Dr. Krenz and I went to Joey's talk at National NSEA conference, where Joey talked about one of his research participants challenged himself to eat 1,000 grams of protein in one day. Yeah. That is a lot of protein. Okay, so Scott, if protein is so great for us, do we even need to eat carbohydrates and fat? Like, what's the value of eating those things if protein's so great for us?
Yeah, so obviously a balanced diet is super important, and eating enough. We have essential fatty acids, and then fats are, so we also have fat soluble vitamins as well. So you need to consume fat in your diet. So I've had people as well suggest that, oh, I'm just going to cut out all the fat in my diet. I'm like, well, then you're going to die, because we have essential fatty acids. We have things that they're super important for us. So you need fat in your diet. The other thing too, especially for firefighters, is that you're going to be burning a lot of calories, and fat is actually a very energy dense macronutrient. So you get more energy out of it per gram. So that's a very useful way, especially if you're trying to just get calories to maintain, a huge amount of physical activity that may be required. So something to be aware of, especially if you want to increase your caloric intake. The other thing too is we have carbohydrates. And so this other kind of new diet that's emerging is the ketogenic diet, so a low carb, high fat diet. But we know I know you're, I've studied biochemistry, so you understand metabolism, so I'm going to try to explain this kind of the best I can. But we can only use energy at the same speed that we can create energy. And if you have a mismatch between those two, so if you can't produce energy at the same speed that you're using it, it's going to signal your body to slow down, and you're going to have fatigue. So we want to avoid fatigue, especially if you're a firefighter trying to save somebody or go into a burning building. You don't want to be fatigued. You want to have lots of energy, and you want to be able to use a lot of energy quickly. And so carbohydrates, you can produce energy faster with carbohydrates than you can with fat. And so especially during high intensity exercise, carbohydrates are really, really important. And so that's something to be aware of. And yes, there are health benefits to low carb, high fat diets. It can help people lose weight, for example. So depending on the context and the goal, there are some benefits to that. Or if somebody is a diabetic, for example, there's a researcher that I collaborate with. His name is Dr. John Little at UBC Okanagan, and he's showing some great benefits of a low carb, high fat diet in people that are diabetics. But for firefighters and athletes that need to do high intensity exercise, right now it's very clear and based off the biochemistry that you need carbohydrates to support that high intensity exercise.
I like too what you said, Scott, about a certain diet might be beneficial for a certain population. So context matters. You can't just look at what worked for one person and hop to that. And so I want you to hit just really quickly. You talked about the micronutrients, but where in which one of these protein, carbohydrates, i.e. fruits and vegetables, or healthy fats are we getting those micronutrients?
So eating kind of fruits and vegetables is probably the best way to hit those micronutrients. So just taking a multivitamin is probably not the best way to do that. And we know now, we're learning a lot more as scientists that whole foods are a lot healthier than supplements are. Particularly, so there's actually a study that where they looked at consuming eggs that contain the yolk versus egg whites, and they showed that the egg with the egg yolk actually made their muscles grow more. So they measured this thing called muscle protein synthetic response. And so if you ate the whole egg, you actually got a better response to exercise compared to just eating just the egg whites, even when they're a match for the amount of protein. So we're learning more and more about kind of all these benefits of eating whole food. So that's why one of the sledgehammers is eat real food. So eat lots of fruits and vegetables, eat a plant-based diet. That's definitely a way to get all those kind of healthy things to support all these things that are happening within your body as well, to make sure you're getting all those vitamins and minerals.
Perfect. So once you have all of those things in order, you may want to consider a few supplements. And since you are Dr. Creatine, why don't we talk about that one first?
Sure, yeah. So I've done quite a bit of research with regards to creatine supplementation. Again, it's usually in conjunction with exercise and particularly resistance training. And we have shown that in both younger and older individuals that if you take creatine and resistance train, you can get bigger and stronger muscles compared to if you just resistance trained alone. So creatine is one of the few supplements that's shown to be scientifically validated to actually have some sort of impact. The thing that if you follow me on Instagram, for example, I posted a picture of this guy that he created this shirt. It has this guy on creatine and he's like exploding. And I was like, oh, that's super cool, right? But I think that's the expectation that people have when they take creatine as a supplement. And a lot of people are like, oh, it doesn't work for me. I don't know, like it's not having a big impact. But we know through science that it has an impact, but it's a very small impact. Just like all supplements, they might work, but they're what I call pinpricks. They're not things that are going to have this massive effect. They're just going to have a small beneficial effect. So once you're right. So once you have everything else in order, then perhaps, yeah, you can try creatine, and creatine does have some evidence that it can actually be of benefit.
And what I love about creatine is, of course, the muscle benefits, but also it's been shown to be great for brain and bone. So can you just tell us about that?
Yeah. So creatine, so the way that it actually works is it gets into cells and then it gets converted into phosphocreatine. And that can be broken down and create energy. And so anywhere in your body where you essentially need energy, and if you need it really, really quickly, like doing a 5-second sprint, or even in your brain, if your brain's in a stress situation, like if you're sleep deprived or something, creatine seems to be really effective. And there's some evidence that if you supplement with creatine, you can get more creatine in your brain, and it can support cognitive processes, and especially during real stress situations, like if you're sleep deprived. There's a couple studies to support creatine's effectiveness.
And so sleep deprived and stress sounds like our population, firefighters and first responders. So
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Creatine is one of those supplements that I recommend to everyone. It's safe, it's effective, and it's inexpensive. You can get a big tub of it for, $15, $20 at the most. The other supplement that I give a little stack to the firefighters, and by stack we just mean a few supplements that we put together. So one of the ones that we probably should have talked about this, Forbes, before, but the Whey Protein, based on the research out of Abby's husband's lab. Are you familiar with that study in firefighters?
No, I'm not. Yeah.
Okay, see, this is why we should have talked about it before. Our friend Abby Smith-Ryan's husband at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, did a research study where they supplemented with a whey protein shake in firefighters, and absent any other changes, so they didn't increase their exercise, they didn't change their calories, they got improvements in body composition. So not huge ones, of course. So whey protein shake, if you can tolerate it, creatine, and then I also recommend an omega-3 supplement just for the neuroprotective. There's studies out there that are showing that it's important for mental health. So that's kind of my stack. Anything else that you would ever consider, Forbes?
Those are definitely the main ones. From a sport nutrition standpoint, there's caffeine, but the problem with caffeine though is the sleep side of it. So we know that even if you consume caffeine in the morning, that it can actually impact your sleep at night. So it's something to be aware of, and especially because sleep has such a big impact that caffeine is something to be perhaps considered in certain situations. Again, context might be important, but just understand that it can also impact your sleep. So it stays in your body for a really long period of time. Usually the half-life of caffeine is about 4 to 6 hours. So that means, for example, say you just, for simplicity's sake, say you get 100 units of caffeine into your body. After 4 hours, you would have 50 units of caffeine left in your body. And then you wait another 4 hours, it would be half of that. So it'd be down to 25. So it stays in your body for a really long period of time. The other thing too is there's some evidence that your genetic profile can actually influence the effectiveness of caffeine as well. So some people just might not respond to it, and some people could respond really well to caffeine. So that's another supplement, at least in the sport nutrition world. But for firefighters, yeah, it's probably something that I wouldn't recommend. I think you hit the main ones for sure. Omega-3 supplementation, whey protein to support muscle mass and body composition, and then creatine. If they're doing those, then that's, they're going to be very well off.
And it's interesting you mentioned the caffeine, because just yesterday I had the conversation with Jacqueline from First Responder Sleep Recovery, and that's one of the things she said you have to be very careful with, is that the caffeine sticks around for so long and may affect your sleep. But I have firefighters that literally will drink coffee and then go to bed, and they say, I can sleep. I wonder if they can really sleep. All right.
Absolutely.
Well, I have just one last thing to say. Forbes and I have been friends for almost a year now, and finally I have surpassed him on Instagram. I have 5 more followers than Forbes, and then he's probably going to unfollow me after this. So, but just kidding. But social media is super powerful to connect people, and especially during this time of, quarantine and shelter in place and stay at home, staying connected is important. So Scott, I super, super appreciate you. I love our conversations and our engagement on social media, and shout out and thanks a lot. I was hoping I get my daily dose of dog. Hi, Daisy. Oh my gosh.
There's one more cameo right here.
Hi. Forbes has awesome kids. I love them. All right. Hey, I love your shirt, by the way, too. That's amazing. Oh, wait.
Thank you, yeah.
Put Daisy back up. I'm going to screenshot us. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Thanks, Forbes. Have a really great day.
Okay, see you, Annette.
Bye.